Coincidentally, just about the time that my mother and Moishe meet, Hitler is elected to the presidency of the Reich, and his anti-Semitic policies very soon follow that. So my mother's affair with Moishe was carried on just through the years that the fascist powers were spreading throughout Europe and moving east, and she still had family back in Latvia. She had a mother and two sisters and a brother whom she loved very much. She was particularly close to the brother because there was a 7-year difference between them, and she helped raise him, as often happened in Europe, where the oldest kid helps raise the younger children. One of her sisters, a full sister, Ray, has come to America. She came in 1923, and she too was unmarried, although she's already 33 years old. In taste and temperament and appearance, Ray is in every way the opposite of my mother, and they have a real love-hate relationship. But they do work together to try to get the rest of the family out of Latvia and to bring them into America, or to bring them anywhere outside of Europe, because, of course, Jewish refugees were trying to flee from Hitler's path. The next section I want to read takes place in 1939. This is only 2 months after Kristallnacht in November 1938, which of course was the devastating anti-Jewish riots in Germany and Austria. Mary has learned by now that there's only a tiny quota of Jews from Latvia who will be allowed into the country, of anyone from Latvia. There was a formula. It was 2% of the immigrants from a particular country who were here in 1890. And as you can imagine, there were hardly any immigrants in 1890 from Latvia in America. So she learns also that Eastern Europeans are considered greatly undesirable, the big undesirables of the period. There have always been undesirables in America. The Irish were undesirable, and German immigrants were undesirable. German Jewish immigrants were undesirable, and then Eastern European Jews were undesirable, and so it's always gone, alas. But Eastern Europeans, as she finds out, are having a particularly hard time coming into the country. And the worst part is that it might be possible, but you have to have a lot of money, and of course she has no money to rescue her family. So at this point, she thinks she's going crazy. She's been trying for years now to help her family. The relationship with Moishe started in 1932. It's already 1939, and it's clear that he's not going to marry her, and things get more and more difficult for her. So I want to read a little bit from that section. If any tiny vestige of the old Mary, steeped in the silliness of love songs and movies, survived into her 42nd year, Kristallnacht delivered its death blow. That's what my mother will tell me years later. Now it's 2 months later, 1939. After work, she stops at the little candy store a block away from her apartment. She always exchanges a hello with Mr. Solomon, the store's ancient owner, who knows to expect her every evening about 6:30 and has already taken from their racks the Vorwärts, the Freiheit, and Der Tag, and those are all Yiddish papers, of course, which he hands her neatly folded. She deposits 3 nickels into Mr. Solomon's gnarled hand and carries the papers home, hugging them under her arm, anxious to scan them for news even before she makes herself some supper. In the evening and on the weekends, if Moishe isn't there, as he seldom is these days, she's gotten into the habit of snapping on the radio, not to hear what's new on the hit parade like she once used to, but to listen to the news broadcasts of H.V. Kaltenborn, Robert Trout, Walter Winchell. Nowadays, if the station to which she's tuned in is playing love songs, she does chores that require attention until one of the newscasters comes on. Then she pulls her chair close to the radio and listens intently for any words about Hitler, the Jews, immigration. At work during lunchtime, she still goes over to the cutter's table with the others who can't read English well enough to understand the New York Times, and they listen to Jack read what the newspaper has to say on those subjects. She can't remember the days she wasn't glued to the news. At the end of January, my mother reads in her Yiddish papers that Hitler has established the Reich's Central Office for Jewish Immigration. Does that mean Hitler just wants to get Jews out of his territory and he won't keep spreading his venom after all? A few days later, the fascist Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia, Rudolf Beran, is also demanding a speedy immigration of Jews from his country. But to where? In Romania, the fascists are declaring Yidini in Palestina, Yids to Palestine. Yes, Yids to Palestine would be good. But the Arabs are demanding of the British, who have jurisdiction over the country, keep the Yids out. As far as the whole world is concerned, there's no place for Jews but out of it. My mother can't make sense of it all. It's like trying to navigate a labyrinth drawn by some evil spirit. You run here and there, through its sly twists and turns that might lead to freedom, but end always at menacing walls, black and stoppable as death. When she's alone and the news is very frightening, she can't control her anxieties. She feels impending horror just as sure as she feels her splitting head and splintering heart. She runs round and round, bumping into furniture, tearing her hair, tearing at her clothes. She bites her lips so the neighbors won't hear her cries and call the insane asylum. But she must get hold of herself, for the sake of Herschel and Imama and of Rom and all of them. She must keep looking for more avenues to try, though her hopes are less substantial than a puff of breath on the January air. In Der Tag, she reads that the Quakers are starting a farm they call Stattergood, and they will take in refugees to work there. She runs to Ray's house. Ray has already put on her coat with the huge shoulder pads that make her look like a football-playing dwarf. She holds her little pillbox hat in her hand, about to put it on. "Listen, I'm meeting somebody for lunch. I can't talk to you right now." "This can't wait." Mary shoves the article from Der Tag into her hands. "We gotta write the paper right away and find out what to do." Ray reads, her hand pressed to her cheek, to her heart. Dank Gott, thank God, we always grew vegetables," she cries as she unbuttons her coat and throws it on her bed. She looks around her room for some writing paper and a pencil. They hurry into the kitchen, where Ray lifts the oilcloth off the table so they'll have a hard surface on which to write. Mary hovers over her while they compose a letter to Der Tag, which Ray painstakingly prints in her best Yiddish hand. How can they find out when the Quaker farm will start? How far from New York will it be located? Will the Quakers help Ray and Mary Lifton bring family members from Latvia to the farm? Tell him Hinda knows how to take care of a cow, and the mama sells the vegetables she grows herself. Mary leans over Ray's shoulder and dictates. Tell him that Herschel can fix machinery. Remember when he was just a little boy and he fixed the broken sewing machine that not even their tata knew what to do with? Tell them they'd be very happy to learn any work they have to for a farm, and they'll all work very hard. Mary keeps nudging Ray, pushing at the small of her back. "Stop already," Ray yells, shrugging her off. But she writes down everything Mary says. A few days later, Ray receives a formally worded letter from Der Tag's editorial office in Brooklyn. Der Tag is sorry to inform the Mesdames Lifton that it is Der Tag's understanding that for the time being, the administrators of the Quaker farm, which will begin operations this coming July and will be located in Iowa, are intending to bring only 30 German and Austrian Jewish refugees there for resettlement.